A very good evening and a warm welcome to all who have joined us today. Today, the 22nd of May, is the International Day for Biological Diversity. This is a United Nations sanctioned international day to increase the understanding and raise awareness on the biodiversity issues of today's world. Just look at the history of this day. International Day for Biological Diversity first came into being on 29th of December 1993, where the Convention for Biological Diversity, or the CBD, first entered into force. Later, the UN General Assembly moved it to 22nd of May in the year 2000, since when we have been celebrating it for more than 2 decades. However, despite all the celebrations and agreements towards saving biodiversity, the humankind has been driving biodiversity towards the brink of obliteration through various activities such as deforestation, pollution, habitat destruction, and unsustainable developments. This very reason has brought all of us to a point where taking actions towards protecting biodiversity is if we are to ensure that the planet Earth would still be a livable place for all the beings who share it, including us, the humans, in the future. As a youth-led international network of individuals and youth organizations from around the world, driven and united by the passion to protect biodiversity, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, or the GIBN, has been raising the voice of the youth and urging the global community to take actions which are necessary to save biodiversity for more than 10 years. As of today, GIBN has 50 plus chapters and 558 member organizations with more than 1.2 million members from 172 countries around the world. And GIBN is the official representation of youth at the CBD negotiations, and we are committed to creating and inspiring young leaders to work for sustainable use and conservation of biodiversity. In the International Day for Biological Diversity, the Sri Lankan chapter of GIBN has organized in the honor of the International Day for Biological Diversity, the Sri Lankan chapter of GIBN has organized a series of webinars to raise awareness of some of the pressing matters in the biodiversity conservation of our country. And today, this meeting marks the beginning of this series of webinars. This year's theme for this International Day for Biological Diversity is From Agreement to Action. And we believe that strong understanding and awareness is the stepping stone to taking actions towards saving biodiversity. As you all know already, today's topic of discussion is coexistence in the midst of conflict, addressing human-elephant conflict in Sri Lanka through community-based conservation. So, to share his wisdom with us on this very critical matter of human-elephant conflict and what can be done to address this very increasing matter through community-based conservation, we invited Professor Devaka Weerakoon, who is a senior professor and the head of the Department of Zoology and Environmental Sciences of the University of Colombo. Professor Devaka has a distinguished teaching and research career spanning over 3 decades in the field of ecology and behavior of Asian elephants and many other fields of wildlife conservation and management. And also, he has been a member of the Asian Elephant Specialist Group of the Species Survival Commission of the IUCN, and has shared his excellence with many other national and international organizations and institutions to direct their efforts on conserving biodiversity. So without further ado, I invite Professor Devaka Weerakoon to address this meeting. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lasal. Good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with you today. Permit me to share my screen. So I hope all of you can see my screen. So basically, what I've been asked to talk about uh, is coexistence in the midst of conflict when it comes to addressing the human-elephant conflict. So I would like to begin by just exploring the concept that we are going to be talking about, where coexistence basically refers to when two or more individuals or a species living or existing at the same time or in the same space in harmony. Whereas conflict is the other side of the coin, where uh, existing or sharing a common space by two or more individuals or species lead to negative interactions between the parties. So there are various types of conflicts we can talk about, but focus today is on the human-elephant conflict, which is one of the conflicts that are taking place in Sri Lanka among a much broader context, which we refer to as the human-wildlife conflict, because elephant is not the only animal that we are in conflict with. And we see that this is an emerging conservation issue from the point of view of conservation biologists, but it is also a serious social issue from the point of view of the people who are suffering from this conflict. And it's also a huge economic issue because this conflict leads to loss of property, crops, and variety of other economic losses. But the question that we would try to explore is there a way for us to coexist between these two species and thereby reduce these negative impacts uh, to some manageable level? But if we are to coexist, first we must explore why there is a conflict, because our inability to coexist is driven by the conflict. And what is the nature of the conflict? So I will spend my first half of the lecture or this presentation trying to explain to you why is there a conflict and why the conflict continues to escalate. Now, the conflict has many phases. This is one type of conflict where elephants damage crops. They either walk through, this is a early stage battlefield, or they can come to a later stage battlefield and cause even more serious damage, or they can cause uh, uh, damage to other crops as well. This is another phase of the conflict where the elephants will come and damage houses. And sometimes when a wall collapses, these are very small houses. These people are very poor. So they have maybe only one room to live. So when the wall collapses, people who are sleeping inside the house might get suffocated by the wall collapsing on them, leading to even worse outcomes. And this is the most complicated uh, side of the conflict, where elephants actually cause injury or death to human beings. And on the other side, we also see that human beings respond or retaliate to this in a very, very negative way. What you see here is an elephant who has bitten a jawbone. You can see the entire jaw is damaged. This elephant is not capable of feeding, and therefore, unless we feed them, bring this kind of animal to captivity and try to feed them, they're not going to survive. You can see here this little young elephant, you can see the trunk has been caught in a snare. The trunk is almost severed by the snare. So the baby elephant cannot use the trunk, which is a very important part of the elephant. They use the trunk for feeding, drinking, and number of other activities. So if the trunk cannot be used, the survival of an elephant like this becomes questionable. What you see here is an elephant that has been electrocuted to death. So basically, when when you look at this conflict, you can see many sides. On the human dimension, you have crop damage, property damage, and ultimately injury and death to people. And people retaliate towards elephants also in a very negative manner, which leads to injury and death to elephants. Now, if you look at the numbers, we can see that these are the elephant deaths recorded during the last 15 years or so. And you can see if you, this red line sort of shows a trend line as to how the numbers are changing over time. And you can see there's an increasing trend. We are now losing, compared to 2005, 6, where we were losing close to 150 elephants per annum. Now we are losing close to 400 elephants every year. Now that is a fairly big number when it comes to a small population, because our total elephant population is estimated to be somewhere around 6,000. So 400 elephants dying out of a population of 6,000 is a serious concern. On the other side, we can see the human deaths. Again, if you look at the trend line, you can see human deaths are also increasing. So what this basically tells us is, despite spending a lot of money, despite making a huge effort to address this, the conflict is escalating. And when you look at the human deaths, when you look at the elephant deaths, we find that majority of the elephants who are dying due to conflict are killed by either jaw bombs or nail bolts or trap guns. None of these are very humane ways, which result in a lot of suffering in the animal. And most of the animals that are dying are male elephants, which will have long-term consequence on the sex ratio of the elephant population. And when you look at the human beings who are also suffering from this, you can see majority of the people who are dying are male, who are between 40 to 70 years. These are the older farmers who are trying to defend their crop, uh, or people who have to go to their crop field to defend it and meets an elephant and meets death. So this is, when you look at both sides, is a fairly serious problem. Now, why have we failed to manage this, even though we have done a lot of we have attempted many management prescriptions to address this issue over the years, yet we are having an escalating problem. So I think it's prudent for us to try and spend a little time to understand, why have we failed to address this issue. I think uh, now that we have lots of information on the Sri Lankan elephant, I find that our failure is rooted in our inability to apply good science in management. Specifically, I'm going to talk about uh, four different things. The feeding behavior of elephants and how we have failed to use what the science tells us in managing the elephant. The ranging behavior, again, the science shows how the ranging behavior is, what are the drivers that define ranging behavior. However, our management has failed to take into account these scientific discoveries. Thirdly, the social behavior, and finally, learning behavior. So I will briefly give you some examples based on the data we have collected over the years to show how our failure in to address or integrate this knowledge into management have resulted in failure in managing the conflict. So let us first take the feeding behavior. The elephants are herbivores. They feed on plant matter, and their digestive system compared to a cattle or other herbivores are fairly less efficient, because um, generally mammals cannot digest cellulose, so they have to go into some symbiotic relationship with microorganisms who are capable of that. So most herbivores carry a compartment in their digestive system to house these symbionts who will digest the cellulose in the food that they intake. And cellulose is the most abundant molecule in the plant matter. So we have two kinds of uh, uh, herbivores. One type we refer to as foregut fermenters or ruminants, where the chamber that houses the symbionts are in the anterior or the initial part of the digestive tract. Then we have hindgut fermenters, where the chamber that uh, houses the symbionts are towards the latter part of the digestive tract. And elephants belong to this hindgut fermenters, where the digestion, since the digestion takes place at the latter part of the gut, their digestion is not efficient. If you may have seen elephant dung, and if you have also seen cow dung, when you compare, you can see in cow dung, it's very it's highly digested, and when it dries out it becomes a sort of a powdery consistency, whereas if you look at elephant dung, you can see a lot of undigested parts in it, which indicates that it is compared to ruminant, the digestion is not so efficient. So because they are large animals, and because their digestion is not all that efficient, they have to eat lots of plant matter. So generally, an adult elephant on a day eats about 150 kilograms of plant matter. So that's a lot of plant matter. And all what elephants do is they feed about 16 hours of the day. So for them, it's one big long meal, the day of an elephant, because they have to find this food and consume it to keep their large bodies going. However, when you look at the plants do not like herbivores to eat them, because if uh, herbivores come and eat their parts like leaves, their ability to photosynthesis goes down. So that will have an impact on their survival. So when you look at plants, they have come up with various defense mechanisms to discourage herbivores from feeding on them. Some of these are physical uh, defenses, like having waxy cuticles, thorns, spines, etc. And some plants have uh, developed chemical defenses which are highly toxic, which can either cause discomfort in the herbivore that feeds it, or it can even cause death of the herbivore. So herbivores associate these plants with this poisonous nature, and they learn to avoid them. So that is the way the plants try to deal with herbivory. However, how does this apply to elephants? Now, if an elephant feeds on uh, plants that have chemical defenses, and since they're eating a lot of plant matter, they will be putting themselves in harm's way, because uh, if you're taking toxic matter along with your food, your liver will have to process that toxins, and the liver has certain limits. And if you exceed it, if you are exposing yourself to large quantities of toxins, you're going to have liver failure. On the other hand, if you're going to be feeding mostly on plants that are having physical adaptations, it may cause some discomfort, but it's not going to expose you to dangerous chemicals. So when you look at plants, uh, how they invest on these defenses, because all organisms have limited energy budgets. So plants are also subjected to that same law. So plants that live longer have a lot to defend, and therefore they are prepared to invest more. And when you look at such plants, you can see they go for chemical defenses, because chemical defenses are expensive. because you have to continuously produce these chemicals because they have a short lifetime. Whereas if you have a thorn or something, until it breaks, it is there. So physical defenses are energetically more cheaper. So plants that live longer will try to invest more on their defense because it makes sense. If you're going to live long, you must protect yourself. But if you're going to live a very short life, it doesn't make sense for them to spend a lot of energy on defense. They should spend their energy on reproduction and so on. So what we say is short-lived plants like herbs uh, and grasses and so on invest less on chemical defenses, but mostly they try to go for physical defenses. And trees that live longer tend to have chemical defenses. So an elephant eats, it's a generalized feeder. It feeds on many plant species. Nearly the studies show more than 200 plant species are utilized by elephants as food, but majority of them are herbaceous species, not trees. So what elephants like, the, the, the food that elephants prefer are found in places like this, sort of in grasslands or tank beds or disturbed habitats. So we refer to elephants as edge species. So this is the kind of habitat. This is an habitat which has been subjected to long-term shifting cultivation. You can see it's a scrub habitat. It comprises mostly of uh, short-term herbaceous plants. And this kind of habitats can support large number of elephants because this is the kind of food that they prefer. So let me introduce another concept called carrying capacity. That is how much individuals can be accommodated within a unit area, which depends on the ability of that landscape to provide the needs of the animal. So the needs of the animal are food, water, and places to breathe. So if you consider food, this kind of habitat, which provides a lot of food for elephants, can support large number of elephants in a smaller area. So roughly per elephant in a habitat like this, we need about 33 hectares. And this kind of habitat is created by this type of activity. This is what is referred to as chain cultivation or slash and burn or shifting cultivation, where a farmer comes, clears a patch of forest or scrub, burns it, cultivates, then allow it to fallow, which will result in again small plants establishing, and over a couple of years it will come to this stage and the farmer returns back, clears, burns, cultivate, and let it fallow. So this cycle will constantly keep the landscape either in this form, this form, this form, or this form. But it will not go beyond that because the farmer is continuously disturbing the habitat. And if you look at the landscape that has been managed like this, you can see this aerial view shows that some areas you can see are uh, abandoned recently, some areas have grown a little more. So what it creates is a mosaic. Some China's abandoned maybe a few months, some abandoned for a year, maybe a couple of years. So they are in different stages of growth. Now, uh, one of the management prescriptions we have uh, used for elephants is protecting or set aside land for protecting elephants. These are either national parks or nature reserves or sanctuaries. So if you look at our protected area network, roughly about 50% of the land area in Sri Lanka has been set aside primarily for conservation of elephants. So when you take this land before it was protected, it was managed in this kind of cycle by farmers, which creates ideal habitats for elephants. Now, if you once you declare it as a protected area, there is uh, it is not possible for farmer to continue to do that. We have to take the people out from the protected area, and that slash and burn cycle is replaced by another cycle, which is called the natural succession. This is what happens in any land area. If you let it be over a period of time, it grows into the most possible habitat, which is called the climax vegetation. And in dry zone, this is the dry mix evergreen forest is the climax vegetation you can find in the dry zone. So basically, if you remove the farmer, if you protect the land and remove the farmer, the, the land will eventually, over a period of time, will go into a situation like this. And if you look at a forest like this, uh, it has fewer food plants for elephants, and therefore they need a much larger area to support themselves. So if you look at the carrying capacity of a habitat like this, it's about 1 elephant per 500 hectares. So basically what we have done is we taken land that was managed like this, which could support large number of elephants, declare them as protected areas, and since that stops this management, eventually the protected area will grow into a forest which can support fewer elephants. So we set aside areas for elephant conservation, but if we don't manage them, keep them in this state, then over the years it becomes less conducive for elephants. And then what happens is, since the carrying capacity goes down, elephants will have to come outside the protected area where still the land is managed under shifting cultivation and where there is plenty of food. But when that happens, elephants come into human use areas, and this leads to a conflict. So this is one of the things that where we have made a fundamental mistake, where we have not understood their feeding behavior, and we have not managed protected areas in a manner that will have high carrying capacity for elephants. And as a consequence, the elephants tend to come out of the protected area because there is not enough food for them in the protected area as time goes by. So that is one issue. Now, the second thing that we have to understand is this thing called ranging behavior. All organisms have a home range, an area that animal use to meet its fundamental requirements, which is food, water, breeding sites. Now, the size of the home range will be defined by how these resources are distributed in time and space in a given area. In like, if I may go back here, in this in a smaller area, there's a lot of food for elephants. Whereas if it is like this, there's less food in the same unique area compared to this habitat. So basically, if you look at these two habitats, this is much better for elephants compared to that. So depending on how much of these resources are available, which will vary from one landscape to another, the size of the home range will also change. And this shows, this diagram shows you some home ranges of animals that have been tracked using satellite collars. And you can see some have very large home ranges, some have very small home ranges. So there is no fixed value for home range because it depends on the availability of resources. So the size of a home range will be defined by the size of the animal, bigger the requirements, bigger the range size. The quality of habitat or the ability of that habitat to provide the requirements. So if you look at elephants, this will have high habitat quality compared to that because you can have more food in a smaller area. And how these resources are distributed? Is it distributed as a single patch, or is this uh, feeding areas are scattered? Then they will have to move between patches to meet their demand and so on. And also sometimes when it comes to elephants, the males tend to increase their age during must, which is the period where they are increasing their home range looking for mates. Must is the period where males will be trying to mate with females, and therefore they will tend to uh, range over a larger area looking for possible partners. Now, how does this knowledge uh, come into play when it comes to managing elephants? Now, if we want to keep elephants uh, uh, in a smaller area or inside the protected areas, what we have to do, like I've indicated earlier, is to increase the carrying capacity, making the area conducive for elephants by making sure that the type of food that they want is there. So this is what is referred to as habitat management, where we try to manage the habitat within the protected area to uh, in a way that would support higher number of elephants to use that protected area by increasing its carrying capacity. Or we can also achieve this by providing food to animals. Now, if you go to Pinnavara, in a very small area, we are able to maintain about 80 plus elephants because their food is being given to them. And therefore, we can keep large number of animals in a smaller space because uh, they don't have to roam around looking for their food. But if we take the same number, and if they have to find food for themselves, they will need a much larger area. And also, I will come towards the end of it. Now, managing habitats within PAs is also very expensive because somebody will have to go and create the habitat for elephant. Whereas if we look at uh, the example I gave with shifting cultivation, the farmers are creating habitat by their practice. So that is how this managed elephant range concept came out. I will visit it towards the end of my presentation and explain what a managed elephant range is and what is why managed elephant ranges have been proposed as a solution to human-elephant conflict. Now, um, the other thing is when you the knowledge of ranging behavior becomes very important for us to understand how elephants may behave in a fragmented habitat, because in most cases outside the protected areas there are elephants living, but the in order to meet their requirements, since the forest patches or natural habitats are found as fragments, they have to move around a large area to meet their demand. So I'm going to show you this diagram where this is from the northwestern province, from the Galgamo area. Each color indicates a herd of elephants, and we've been tracking them using satellite telemetry. So each location indicates a place where that herd has been recorded. So it has been recorded here, here, but mostly in this region. And the each color indicates a different herd. So you can see there are at least 5 different herds being tracked in using this area. The dark green ones, the light green ones, the dark blue, light blue, orange, yellow, and so on. So you're seeing the movement of a number of different herds who are using this area. And this is a tank right here. That's why there are no uh, locations inside, because it's full of water most of the time. But you can see when you look at this that there are 2 areas where they generally use. Some herds are using this area mostly. And if you look at this dark green herd, they are using this area, but they are crossing over. These guys are crossing over to this side, these guys are crossing. So these are 2, what we refer to as habitat patches used by elephants. And if you look at the crossing over, you can see most of them are using this area to cross over from this patch to this patch. So if we go and place some paddy fields or human habitations in this part, these animals will have to go through it, resulting in conflict. So it is important for us to understand these kind of short corridors connecting habitat patches and keep them free, allowing elephants to move without coming into contact with people. That way you reduce the conflict. So again, this is one way that we can use ranging data or our information available on ranging behavior to minimize conflict by designing short corridors and facilitating free movement of elephants. And 2 of the management techniques that's being used in Sri Lanka to manage conflict is one is driving elephants away from human use areas into protected areas, and the other is this is done when a large number of elephants need to be moved out of an area. This is done when a problem elephant is identified and that problem elephant is captured and removed to a protected area so that it cannot cause problems to people. But again, I'm going to show you our inability to understand the ranging behavior or the lack of understanding uh, has resulted in this kind of management being done. But this type of management is not effective because it does not take into consideration the home range concept of this large animal which uses huge home ranges. So I'm going to show you two examples to show why drives and translocations uh, do not work very well as management prescriptions to manage human-elephant conflict. So this example is from the deep south of Sri Lanka. This is Weerakoon National Park. This is Lunugambera National Park. And this area is the area that has coming under the RB, Right Bank Canal development of Udawalawa Reservoir. So this area was to be developed as an agricultural area. And one of the conditions that were imposed is if agriculture is going to be done, we cannot have elephants in this part because they will cause crop damage and they had to be removed. So the solution that was given by the ecologists was to take these elephants and move them into this area, which is which has less human habitation, and try to manage this area in a way that will have low conflict. But what was done at the end was a decision was taken to drive all these elephants into this protected area because the protected area has no people. So if we push the elephants into the protected area, the expectation was that we can reduce the human-elephant conflict in this whole area. So there was a huge elephant drive. Some of you may have seen it on TV. Uh, um, it was shown on many occasions. And what happened was all these elephants were driven to Lunugambera National Park, or at least an attempt was made to push these elephants into the park. Now, what happened is this is a photograph of that drive where towards the latter part, all these elephants, this is the side where the development area, this is Lunugambera here, and this is the road that separates, this is the Tanamal Villa Veera Road. You can see all these elephants were driven from the potential human use area into Lunugambera National Park. And you can see most of the elephants that are driven are females with babies and so on. Now, after the drive, it was found that although about more than 200 elephants were driven from that area, still it has left behind about 400 elephants. And also the unfortunate thing is in this kind of drive, we mostly drive females and babies, not the males. Males live solitarily. Most of the time they manage to evade the drive. And the males are the ones who are creating conflict. And what this drive has ended up achieving is driving the females and young ones who are causing conflict from the developed area to a protected area, and leaving behind the males who are likely to cause the conflict. And to see how this thing goes, what the Center for Conservation and Research, who's one of the main institutes that are doing this research, I'm also part of that, has decided to install a satellite collar in one of the elephants that were driven to see what happens to them once we push them into the park. Now, the expectation was, this is Lunugambera National Park, and it extends into Yara National Park in this area. So there is a whole large area that elephants could use. So the expectation was you drive the elephants here and they will move into these forested areas and find uh, better places to live. However, when we look at the animal that we've been tracking, you can see, contrary to the expectation, they never went deeper into this national park. You can see all these dots indicate a reading that was obtained every 6 hours, and you can see all the dots are converging right at the boundary of the park. There's an electric fence here, which is what prevents them from coming, but they were all moving up and down at the boundary, trying to get back to their native home range. So, uh, since a lot of elephants were trapped in this area trying to get back, there was not enough food for them. And elephants are large animals, and if they go without food for a longer period, what will happen is they will lose their body condition. And then in the subsequent dry season, this is what they started looking like. They were basically walking skeletons, and many of them ended up dying. So the outcome of that drive is that we have driven many elephants into starvation and subsequent death. So again, this is because we do not understand the concept of ranging, because the elephants, each elephant has their own home range, and if you drive them out of their home range, they will try to come back, because the area that they're driven to is the home range of other elephants. So uh, it's very difficult for these elephants to establish there. The same thing applies for translocations. Now, this is again, I'm going to show you data from translocation of one animal. This animal is referred to as home, this elephant, and you can see it was actually caught from a game down south near Hambantota, where the elephant was coming with number of others into a feed on a solid waste disposal site, unmanaged solid waste disposal site. So a decision was taken to capture all these elephants and translocate them into Yala National Park, which is nearby. And we managed to place a collar in one of these elephants to track to see what happens to this translocation. So the animals were captured from here and translocated to deep into the Yala National Park. So they were captured, put on vehicles, and this is the electric fence on the boundary of the Yala National Park. This is Manikdanga. So they were transported deep into the protected area. And we know what happened to the animal that had a radio collar and satellite collar. And as you can see, this is where it was released. Immediately it started moving in this direction, because Hambantota is where it has been captured and transported to this location. So it came down, it ran into this electric fence, it started moving up and down, found a gap, came out of it, and came back uh, to the original location where it was captured from, the solid waste dump. You can see now homemade with the collar. But it didn't stop here. So since this translocation was a failure, it was these elephants were captured and again translocated to another national park, uh, this time Udawalawa National Park, north of the Hambantota area where this animal was feeding. The result was the same. Few days later, it came back with few other males uh, to the dump again. And the story doesn't end there. There was a third attempt to capture these animals and translocate them further away into Wasnamo National Park, where it could not find its way back, but it came out of the park, caused some serious damage, and eventually fell into a well and died. So this is an animal who was basically feeding on a dam, which we have translocated to Yala, to Udawalawa, and Waskamo, eventually to death. And we have tracked the translocations of roughly about 17 animals over the years. And what we have found out is that out of these 17, 3 came back, uh, 14 moved into other protected areas, and out of this, 12 came out, only 2 remained in the protected area. So out of the 17 translocated to protected areas, only 2 remained there, but uh, 15 of them came back. And out of this, 5 were shot to death, and they have also caused 7 human deaths. So what we have done is by trying to translocate a problem elephant, we have created a problem in another place. We are transferring one problem in one area into another area, and sometimes even harmless animals have become problem animals after the translocation. Both of these are examples showing that our inability to understand their adherence to their home range and their strong attraction to their home range is not taken into consideration when you drive an elephant away or when you translocate. You're driving it away from its natal home range, and they will try to come back. Some of them will, some might die in the process. So the third thing I would like to focus upon is the social behavior of elephants. Now, elephants generally are social organisms. The females live in herds. They are matriarchal groups where the female group is headed by the female, and the males, when they, after a few years after their birth, leaves the herd and live either as solitary animals or they form small bull groups, which are not permanent groups, but uh, groups that they form and they break down. So they keep changing between solitary life to spending some time with other bulls and so on. And when you look at these two, the males and the females tend to cause conflict very rarely, because if you look at a female dominated herd, there are a lot of young ones, and therefore they tend not to take a lot of risk. But on the other hand, males do take a lot of risk because either they are solitary or as bull groups, they can attack crops and so on. And they always try to maximize their uh, feeding, because that will help them to grow fast, and that will be help them to compete with other males for mating with females. So again, the social behavior is important for us to understand, because these two groups behave very differently when it comes to conflict. And I showed you earlier in the Lunga drive, what we have done is we've ended up driving non-conflict causing herds into the protected area where they did not survive. But bulls, who are mostly solitary, is very difficult to drive because they somehow manage to evade the drive and stay where they are. So this is also something that we have to understand when we undertake drives or translocations, or try to understand conflict, that these social behavior differences or will have an effect on how the conflict or the outcomes of the conflict. So uh, what the final thing I want to talk about is the learning behavior, because all organisms during their lifetime, what we're doing is we're responding to various stimuli. So at any given moment, we receive multiple stimuli. We see things, we hear things, we smell things. So all these stimuli are conveyed to the brain, and we choose to respond to some of those and ignore the others. Now, if you're listening to a lecture, you can see things, you can hear things, you can hear other things, but we ignore them, and you are only focusing on the specific stimuli that you want to pay attention to. So, with time, we learn to respond to certain stimuli and ignore certain stimuli. This leads to a behavior called habituation. So, a lot of animals, if they feel that the stimulus is not beneficial or it does not pose any danger, will learn to ignore that. I mean, the classic example is dogs on the side of a road. I mean, they will just be sleeping on the side of a road, even though vehicles are moving about, because they know that they are not going to be endangered by this most of the time. So otherwise, most animals would move away when a vehicle comes towards them. But sometimes, if they feel that it doesn't lead to a negative outcome, they tend to ignore it. Same thing happens to elephants also. We've tried various types of repellents, firecrackers, lights, fire. All these things initially work because they will recognize this as a threat. But as time goes on, they will recognize that this is not posing a serious threat to them, and they will learn to ignore them and uh, continue to move into areas which are trying to be protected by this type of repellent. Another behavior is conditioning. We learn to associate certain outcomes with uh, with certain stimuli. If the outcome was painful, we learn to avoid that stimuli. If the outcome is nice, we like to continue to respond to that stimuli. So this is another type of behavior which is called conditioning behavior, where you can actually train an animal through reward or punishment, which is the fundamental approach taken when training an animal. You try to get them to do something. If they do it, you give them a remote. If not, you punish them uh, for not doing what you want them to do. And when you keep on doing it, the animal becomes conditioned to do what you want to do. So that is the basic animal training approach taken. Now, the same is used in electric fences. So electric fence gives a shock to the animal. Therefore, they learn to associate the fence with a painful stimuli, and they try to avoid it. Similar things have been tried in other countries with chili bombs or chili fences, which again causes discomfort to them. So they try to avoid them. So compared to a stimulus that doesn't cause pain or discomfort, a stimulus that cause pain or discomfort will make them go away. Whereas the other type, which doesn't cause them pain or discomfort, they will learn over a period of time. It's not going to be a threat, so they will ignore it and continue to come into the area that is being protected by them. So the electric fence appears to be the most uh, uh, efficient way to control elephant coming into human use areas, provided that we meet three conditions. One is we have to properly locate it. Two, it has to be properly designed. And three, it has to be maintained. If you look at this fence, you can see some of the fence posts are on the ground. It's not properly maintained, so it can't maintain an electrical current. As a consequence, it will not be able to prevent elephants from uh, coming out of the forest area where they're supposed to be. Or if you look at this, you can see it's poorly designed. And if you look at this, you can see that you can see an electric fence, but you see elephants on both sides, because this fence is built between two protected areas, one managed by Wildlife Department, the other managed by the Forest Department. Now, if I give you a diagrammatic representation, here is the DWC area, here is the Forest Department area, and the fence is here. Now, the elephant only recognizes an ecological boundary. They don't know that there's a boundary between two different agencies. So, what happens is, since the elephants that are on outside the fence, there is nothing preventing them from coming to human use areas. So they will come to human use areas, raid crops, or cause damage, kill people. So this sort of thing happens a lot because the fence is not located in the right place. So this fence actually should be properly located here, not there. But we do have fences like this, several 100 kilometers of fences like this in Sri Lanka, even though anybody can see this does not make any sense. But nevertheless, that is the reality we are facing. So this again is our inability to understand uh, how the elephants are using the area and where to use the fence to protect the people has led to this kind of conflicting situation. So basically, during the last decade or so, the Center for Conservation Research have been trying a different approach, where instead of most of the time we build fences around protected areas, whereas this approach tries to protect people from elephants by building either permanent fences around their homesteads or their perennial cultivation, but in places we are only using it for a short term, putting seasonal fences. I will explain the two in a moment. And both of these are done with the participation of the communities. So first we have to discuss with the communities uh, how and where the fence is going to be located, and then we have to discuss with them what is their role in it, how do they become part of this fence construction and maintenance. And once agreements are reached, the fence is put up. So what you can see here is the communities are actually doing most of the hard work. The resources are provided from outside. So it's a joint venture, and then they will put up what you see here is a permanent fence built around a village to protect the village, because villagers cannot be co-shared with elephants, because permanent dwellings or perennial plantations, uh, if elephants come into these areas, it causes serious damage. So these sort of areas have to be permanently protected. But if you take a paddy field, it's only used for a short period, like 3 or 4 months. After that, it is allowed to fallow. So in a place like this, putting a permanent fence doesn't make sense. So we've tried a different type of fence called a seasonal fence, where the farmer puts up the fence at the beginning of the cultivation season, and at the end they remove it. So it's only used during the cultivation season. And once the fence is removed, the elephants can come and use this area, feed on the leftover, and this way we can have a coexistence between the farmer and the elephants. Farmers use it during the cultivation season, elephants use it during the fallow season. So this is one particular example of how coexistence can be achieved within communities and elephants by having this kind of different approach rather than having permanent fences all over the place. The other thing is, how can we change the perception of the communities? Because for uh, communities that are living in elephant affected areas, it's always they see them as a problem animal. Either they are attacking their crops, or they are damaging their houses, they're killing their relatives. So they see them as a negative. They're very negative perception about the elephant. But can we change this? Can we maybe try local elephant-based tourism projects? Some pilot projects have been tried out to see whether in elephant areas, whether communities can be trained to run small tourism operations where they can benefit from the presence of the elephants, because most of the time they do not benefit from the presence, because the presence of elephants leads to all kinds of conflicting situations. So can we reverse tables on this? Again, these are all done at pilot level. We have to see what things can be upscaled to really make a significant impact on elephant conservation. I earlier mentioned managed elephant range. This is the managed elephant range that has been uh, uh, um, gazetted in the Matala area. You can see the Matala airport in the middle of it. So the idea was to manage this area as a shifting cultivation area by involving the communities. So block out parts of this, give it to communities to cultivate during the wet season, and then let it fallow. So earlier I showed that the shifting cultivation creates habitat for elephants. So if you take this area, if you do manage shifting cultivation, what you end up doing is you create a very high carrying capacity in this area. So large number of elephants that are outside the protected area can be managed in an area like this, which will take them away from a human use area where they are going to cause conflict. So managed elephant range is a concept that has been presented to have areas with very high carrying capacity, low human use areas, where elephants can be kept, because if there are no protected areas or no other places where they can live without conflicting with people, this is another model, a community-based model that has been proposed. The MER has been gazetted, but the subsequent work of the management has not been undertaken as of yet. So maybe in the future, we hope that if this concept is being implemented on ground, this might give us some good ways to deal with the conflict. So basically, is there a solution to the problem? There are multiple solutions. There's no one silver bullet to human-elephant conflict management. It depends on the location, it depends on the type of conflict and the magnitude. But we have seen some good results working with communities, such as protecting villagers using permanent village fences, have given very good results to mitigate conflict in many conflict-affected villages. Protecting paddy fields using seasonal fences have shown good results, where the paddy fields are not raided less during the cultivation season, but then the elephants will use those areas during the rest of the time, and therefore will not come into human use areas and cause conflict. And then converting perceptions of the communities, like the elephant-based tourism. These are again done at a very low level. But another thing that has been tried is, instead of just locating elephants, translocating them into fortified holding facilities so that they cannot go out into other human use areas, to restrain them in these facilities for a period and see whether they can be rehabilitated. Again, this has been tried, tested, but thus far it has not shown good results. There has been a holding ground in Horopatana, but the results are not very favorable, because the holding ground has not been designed properly. They have failed to hold the animals because the electric fences have not been maintained properly. And also, we a few other approaches have been done to support communities to make them more resilient by providing them uh, various types of compensation, crop insurance programs to compensate their losses, so that they do not feel the loss as great as if they have no compensation. And implementing the managed elephant ranges as planned would also be another way for us to reduce the conflict. So I think I have sort of given you an overview about why we have a conflict, why we have not managed to uh, uh, reduce the conflict, and some of the new approaches that uh, have been tried, tested, uh, and have given some good results, which needs to be upscaled to a larger context in order to have some significant impacts. In closing, I wish to acknowledge most of the information I presented to you have come out of the research carried out by the Center for Conservation and Research. I am a member of that, but I'd like to acknowledge the two leading people who have been responsible for some of the work I presented, Dr. Fernando and Dr. Pastorini, and Dr. Vikramanayake, and a whole host of others who have worked in these projects to collect the data and to try out some of these things on the ground. And thank you very much for Gibbon for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. And if you have any clarifications, I'd be happy to answer.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for that valuable lecture. Now we'll move on to Q&A session. So if any of the participants have some questions, you can unmute and ask.
Hi, I have submitted my question via chat box, but however, I asked my question here.
Yeah, sure.
So, sir, is there any national action plan for to resolve human versus elephant conflicts. So, can you tell me about it?
Actually, I mean, I've been working on elephants for nearly 25 years. I've been involved in developing uh, human-elephant conflict mitigation, at least 4 different plans over the years. We have submitted it to different governments, different presidents, but we have none of them have actually acted upon it. Because what needs to be done, because we have done a lot of work, research over the years. Sri Lanka is one place where elephants have been thoroughly researched. So with the data, we do have the data, and we have, based on that data, we have proposed what needs to be done, what short-term measures, what medium-term measures, and what long-term measures has to be done to mitigate this, and 4 times actually. But uh, it's one thing to have a plan, but if you really want to have results, you have to make it into action. And I think this year the theme of the Biodiversity Day is also agreement to action. We have a lot of agreements, a lot of plans, but if they're not implemented, we can expect very little. So we answered your question, yes, we have produced many plans over the years, but none have been implemented effectively.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? I mean, if the members would like to ask Professor Devaka.
Yes.
Yes, and sir, we have received a few questions through the chat as well.
Yes.
I go to this one first, as we talked about some plans already, and now we all know that to bring any plan into action today we need funds. So somebody has asked us that does the government allocate funds to resolve these conflicts between elephants and humans? I think they're asking, do we get enough funds from the government to take the actions that we are talking about?
Actually, yes, our government spends quite a lot of money for elephant management. They spend money for uh, building electric fences, uh, giving flares to people, and then translocating animals. If you want to, I can show you roughly the values of how much money we are spending. Let me share my screen for a second here.
Yes.
Just one slide to just show you a quantitative answer. Now, in 2018, this is the amount of money we have spent to allocate thunders, for compensation, translocation drives. You can see the total comes to a colossal sum, $1 million. But after spending this kind of money, we still have poor results. So this is the issue that we have to be thinking about. It's not that the government doesn't spend money, but it's spent in mitigation actions that are not scientifically valid. So you can be spending money to do things which are not providing good results. So this is why it's important for us to take stock of what we have done. Now, what I presented is the results of most of the mitigation actions we've done. So we need to think differently. It's not that we don't have money, but we are spending money on the wrong things and expecting a right answer, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, that's clear. And the next question, this one also we got from one of our participants through the chat. They're asking, are there any quantitative methods or indicators to address the issues of this conflict? Like how to measure the socio-economic impact on a community or the the psychological impact on elephants? Are there
Um,
any quantitative methods to measure these things?
there are some, I think, especially to look at the community aspect. There are many studies that reporting what is the cost of human-elephant conflict in terms of crop damage, in terms of, because these can be quantified. I mean, if 1 acre of the field is damaged, we know how many bushels are produced, so how much crop is lost, and that can be quantified into a rupee value. If a house is broken, we know the value of the house. We can, so that kind of quantification has been done not for whole of Sri Lanka, but we have sample studies from many places from which we can make some reasonable extrapolations about what is the economic cost caused by elephant. But at the same time, I must also mention, to be fair, the elephants also have very positive economic impacts, because if you look at the tourism industry, if you look at Min area, we are promoting the gathering of elephants as a global event, which attracts thousands of tourists to this country. And they will pay park entrance fees, which is income directly, but they have to stay in a hotel. So the hotels will benefit from it. And then jeep drivers who will transport them from the hotel to the park will benefit from it. The guides will benefit from it. So if you look at the number of livelihoods centered on elephants in Habarane area, a large number of people are living because of them, and they are getting a huge income. So if you look at the total income that we are getting from our national parks, which are attracting people mostly because of charismatic animals like elephants, leopards, who are again another animal in conflict, or bear, uh, they are very important for us in the tourism sector. So they are causing damage on one side, to which is economic damage to crops, etc. But on the other side, their presence brings a lot of money to the nation. So we have to think of a balance between the two. So we should not only be focusing on the damage they're causing to people, we must also be focusing on the money they are attracting to the nation.
And
Can
yes,
I speak?
and yes,
Hello.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Devaka. I'm Sumati Pala.
Hello, Prof. How are you?
Hi, I'm in Cambridge. Actually, I just listened to you. And now, these days, of course, I think very good lecture and eye opener. But as you said, I put a question also, maybe in the same line, about the
Yes.
future plans, long-term plans, and all that. But as you correctly said, we are using or spending money heavily on unnecessary things, and there is some way that it's normal thing in Sri Lanka. Actually, you waste money, but outcome is nothing, right? So
Mm,
as a community, like seniors, I mean learned people, we need to do something to rectify that. That means the money should go to a planned action where
yes.
future will be peaceful for men and elephants, human and elephant. So
Yes.
what action we should take? Actually, you should take the forefront and do something for that, because we have been talking about it, and I see all the time in the TV and other places the incomplete they highlight. Maybe media is highlighting too much, but
Mm,
we need to do something to use the money, spend it in the right direction. So anything that you should do should talk to everybody and do something. Is that what we should do, Devka?
Actually, yes, I think what you're saying is correct. This is why the issue is the scientists, as scientists, we do not have the mandate to carry out actions on ground other than working with communities. Now, with working with communities, anybody can go ahead and do it as long as the communities are prepared to accept it. So thus far, what we have done is this village fences, seasonal fences. Uh, as organizations, we can go and work with them. But to do bigger things, like now, we don't do the drives, we don't do translocation. These are done by Department of Wildlife Conservation. So we have shared our data with them to show what the outcomes of it. But sometimes they are also forced to do these things, even though they know that they're not going to provide good results because there's political pressure, there are all kinds of issues that they have to deal with. So if we want to make the change, like I said, the plans to prepare these plans, we've spent months collecting data, analyzing it, and then coming up with it. And we need political will to do it because this is not a problem that is affecting a small part of the country. This is a problem that is affecting 2/3 of the country, almost the entire dry zone affected by elephant, and therefore we need to have some political support to implement this plan. That is where I think we are failing because I myself has given this plan to 3 presidents who has taken it and say, oh, let's do so. And then the last president actually called for the plan, and the plan was provided again. People spent a lot of time and gave the plan, but nothing happened. So this is what is very frustrating, where we do not have the ability to uh, convince the politicians that we have to go according to a plan rather than doing ad hoc management or try to troubleshoot, uh, you know, small problems, but we have to have a concerted effort to address this issue if we want to really solve it.
So what should we do? So we have to have some sort of, having a political will. How do you push for that? That's the other question. That's the main question, actually. That's only solution will come only then, right?
Yes, I think it's not only now that political will is not only needed for this issue. In
Yeah.
areas like for climate change, we've been asking for certain things to be done, or for forest lots. For all of this, I think we have the plans, we know what to do, but uh, without the political support, we cannot mainstream those plans. We have National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan. We have so many plans, but very few of them really see any action on the ground. I do not have the answer to your questions. I think the only way is we are hoping that one day a politician will come and listen to what the scientists have to do, say, because in this kind of complex problems, I think we need to use the science that we know to find solutions because these are solutions based on facts and actual research. So if we do not listen to that kind of reasoning and just try to do wishful thinking and hope that the problem will go away, it never will. I don't think it will.
Yeah. Thank you, Devaka. Now I'm in the same group. You remember me, climate change and all that. We work
Yeah,
together, NSF and all that, but things are not working. I am temporary here in Cambridge at present, but then
yeah.
things are, same, nothing moving. So I'm really frustrated. Yes, you
Yeah.
are. Yeah, what to do? Yeah, we'll have to think of something. Thank you, Devaka.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, sir.
And thank you very much, Mr. Sumatipala, for bringing out your question as well. And it's really happy to see senior members of the society like you are still here with us in our efforts as well. So thank you again. And there was Asan I saw him raising the hand. I think he has another question. Asan,
Yes.
I will
Actually, I want to know that um, Yes, of course, government allocate lots of money to resolve this kind of conflicts. In that sense, I want to know, are there any ways to see how this money was used? Because I'm currently working in a story on human versus elephant conflicts in Northwestern province. Uh, Currently, I'm working as a journalist. So
Okay.
this answer will be very useful to me. So
Uh, well, basically the funds are disbursed through mostly Department of Wildlife Conservation, uh, like paying compensation, giving flares, drives are done by them, translocations are done by them. So they have audited accounts, and I think you have the right to request uh, the accounts or how this expenditure was done under the Right to Information Act. But they are accounted for because they are being spent by legitimate government agencies. So they have invoices, all these bills and everything. The expenditure should be accounted for. So you can, if you're working in the Northwestern province, it's actually the hotspot of human-elephant conflict. You can either try to get this information from the director in charge of that area, or you can directly contact the head office and ask for this information. And the information I presented were actually things that we have got from the department.
yes, sir.
I hope that answers your question, Ashan.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Uh, yes. Is there, Ashan, do you have any other question?
Actually, I also want to know what is the past and current projects or plans that resolve the elephant versus human conflicts. So,
I
is there any resources to know those plans?
Yes, I think you should contact Center for Conservation and Research directly. They are in the web. If you just type Center for Conservation and Research, you can reach their website. They are conducting some village fences and seasonal fences in the Northwestern region. Um, and there is a coordinator, Mr. Sampath Ekanayaka. You can, through them, you can contact them and you can visit these places and see for yourself how effective they are, or whether they compare to other mitigation measures. I think if you are a journalist, I think that would be the best way to do it. Otherwise, if you can, I shared my email address. Let me share it again. If you send me, that's the wrong one. Sorry, sharing the wrong presentation.
No, sir. Actually, your email address was in that slide.
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah. It was in the top left corner.
Okay, let me then reshare it again. Can you see now? This is my email address. If you send me an email,
Yeah, it was
no?
there earlier. See.
Okay, let me retry this thing. Or let me just type it in the chat box so you can.
Yes, sir. You can
That's
type it in the
easy.
chat box. That's easier.
There you go. Just send me an email. I will send you the contact details.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for taking your time.
Thank you so much, sir.
So we have one more question that we got through our chat. I don't know it now. They're asking, is there any form of conflict between humans and elephants as a result of climate variability?
To answer your question, we don't have enough empirical data to either approve, say there is a relationship, because climate change related drivers are very slow. Climate change is happening very slowly, but most of the drivers that are behind the conflict are very rapid things, habitat loss or fragmentation. These are happening at a very faster rate than climate change. So I think compared to climate change driven changes, these other drivers which are operating at the moment, like poor management or translocations or habitat loss, these are much bigger issues compared to climate change. Climate change obviously will exacerbate some of these problems because over a long period we will have changes in our climatic zones and so on that will have an effect on how elephants, their ranging might change. But we don't have enough data to really give a concrete answer to that question, whether climate change, how climate change will influence the conflict, because that kind of things are not being done at the moment. Maybe Professor Patipala might be able to shed more light on that.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think we were able to answer all the questions that we received. Let me check one more time. There are any other questions? No. So yeah, we were able to answer all the questions that we received as well. So we can wind up the session. So once again, I'd like to thank Professor Devaka for sharing this invaluable experience and wisdom on this very pressing concern with us. And I'm very sure that it was really helpful to inspire our young generation to take the actions that are necessary to save biodiversity. So thank you very much, sir, again. And
Thank you.
also thank you very much. Yes, thank you, sir. And also thank you very much for participating today, all the participants, our given members, and also we had some participants from outside community as well. So thank you everybody for participating today in our discussion. And also one more thing before we wind up, we'll have a few more webinars going on this series as a part of our celebration for the International Biodiversity Day. And our next lecture is scheduled on 26th of this month, and we'll let you all know through our social media platforms as we did for this one as well. So, yes, yeah. So we can wind up the session. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for joining. And good night.
Good night.